Welcome to ProSessions, our series focused on the generating revenue in the new digital economy. The music and NFT space continues to evolve quickly. So as an extension of ProSessions, we're presenting a series of conversations with artists, technologists, and professionals in the music and NFT space to keep you informed about trends and opportunities. We're thrilled to have Cherie and Brooke Jackson from Water&Music joining us today. Not only have they been tracking NFTs from the beginning of the trend, but they've collected important insights, comprehensive reports on pricing, sales data, breakdowns of genres, platforms, artists, and more. So today they're sharing key insights from their latest report. Welcome, Cherie and Brooke.
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
All right.
So why don't we jump in? I think your last report was in April. Thanks for sharing it with us. This July, why don't we jump in and see what's happening in the music and NFT space?
Sure. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Yes, thank you so much, Lisa and the Recording Academy for having us. I guess just to give a bit more context for this presentation. So yeah, I started tracking and noticing a lot of artists selling NFTs starting almost exactly a year ago in June of 2020. And so it's super interesting to see now, over a year later, how public perception and just market activity around music NFTs has really changed dramatically just in the matter even of a couple of months, thinking from, March to right now. So as Lisa mentioned, our latest or our previous report was published in April, and already, a couple months in crypto time, it could feel like years. And so a lot has changed, a lot of hype has died down, which has given Brooke and myself a lot of time as well to dive deeper into more interesting use cases around NFTs, new platforms that are coming up. And so we're definitely noticing a shift towards trying to think about, what is this technology good for in the long term? And yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to Brooke, who will walk through some of the higher level summary stats and trends that we've seen from music NFT data, especially focused on the last 2 months.
Yeah, so we'll start with a look at the music sales over time. And again, everything we're looking at is just music NFT sales, which, as you can see, so I actually joined Water&Music to start this, some of this research in early May, right as everything was crashing. So it's been kind of interesting to watch what's been happening with the market. You can see the trend very clearly here, but I think probably the two notable things that you should be aware of about that February and March timeframe. Clearly, there was a lot of hype around NFTs at large, not just the music NFTs. In February, we saw the GRAMMYs and the Blau big NFTs, which is the majority of what you're seeing in terms of those sales. And then around early March is when the Beeple Christie's option came. So there was just a lot of talk around NFTs in general. Ethereum was a little higher too, which may also show some of the larger numbers. It's dropped since then. So you're seeing that relative value of those NFTs drop over that time as well. But as you can see, the overall market is down for the last 2 months, and and that exactly follows the rest of the NFT market. So we can talk a little bit more about what we're seeing around that. But if we move on, we've covered a little bit about artists that are assigned to major labels and selling NFTs, and those that are either with smaller independent labels or unaffiliated with major labels or completely unsigned. I think in the past, and Cherie, if you want to jump in at any time to talk about any of the historical stuff, that we were starting to see some trending towards more major label artists starting to sell NFTs. However, what we're seeing in the last 2 months actually is the opposite. We're seeing even more share of the Indian unsigned artists selling NFTs, and only 17% of what we saw over the last 2 months were artists signed to major labels. And we can talk a little bit about, we're still seeing the independent artists driving these sales, but of course, the more celebrity artists are really what's driving the conversation around these. So, for example, well, we're going to see a little bit more of this in a minute, but even Sotheby's is just announced something with Jay-Z. So we're seeing again that conversation continuing around NFTs because of those big celebrities that are driving that. But we're maybe not seeing it translate to as big a sales as we were seeing in the past. But it's interesting to see the opportunity that's still available to independent artists, and there's even more of that coming. So
just one quick point to add on this as well. I think there are just a lot of hypotheses for why this might be the case. One is definitely at the contractual level, can definitely see major labels trying to clamp down, especially on NFTs being sold with music copyrights clearly attached to them. Speaking of Jay-Z, probably the first big music NFT lawsuit we saw in the last month when he sued Dame Dash for allegedly, auctioning off an NFT related to Reasonable Doubt. And I'm sure that won't be the last one. But also there's a more, strategic angle where I think major labels are looking for ways to maximize the value of their entire catalog. I think that's normally how they think about their business, as opposed to just building one-off campaigns for individual artists. And so I think we're seeing, and we will get into this in a couple of slides, labels are not really announcing one-off NFT campaigns, but inking larger licensing deals or strategic partnerships with platforms as a whole. So there's one example of a platform called We Knew, focused on historical cultural moments, and I think they have at least 2 of the 3 major labels on board. So I think we'll see more of those platform-wide deals moving forward.
How much do you think the crypto audience versus mass audience is affecting that growth as well? We've had other people in prior ProSessions really talk about if your audience is, doesn't own cryptocurrency because it's still founded in the crypto market versus a broader audience. How much do you think the slowdown has been affected by the type of fans that are willing or able to buy?
I think so. I guess throughout that whole rise and fall of sales, NFTs have always been a really niche offering. I think the vast majority of people who even know how to set up a crypto wallet, let alone have the disposable income to spend on an NFT that may or may not have value next year, I think that's a very small subgroup of people, mostly from already within the crypto community, even at that level of around $26 billion in sales in March. So I think I guess critically being aware of the fact that this is still largely a niche offering has, I think, encouraged a lot of artists and music companies to at least take a step back and be okay, what is our actual purpose in launching an NFT campaign, especially if for now it probably won't reach most of our fans. And if a lot of fans might even be critical of the at least auction-based NFT model. So so I think that has always been a very niche offering. I think it's just made a lot clearer now just by the economics and the relatively smaller reach in terms of who's actually engaging in the market.
Yeah. And I think very much to that point, the education and the access and just the user experience for a lot of these platforms we've noticed is not the most accessible, and it does feel a little exclusive because you have to have some of this prior knowledge, or in some cases we've seen we already need to have owned an NFT, for example, on Nifty Gateway. So you already need to be part of the environment in NFT world anyway, to even be able to continue to participate. So I think probably sessions like this and education in general about what's going on in the NFT world will start to bring people in. And as we'll see, actually, that's a pretty good segue to the next slide, where we're actually looking at the percentage of genres that we're seeing from the music NFTs. Clearly, you're seeing still just the large majority of being electronic, or at least electronic adjacent, artists selling. And I think that's largely, that is that same audience. That's a specific audience that overlaps well with the crypto space. You're looking at, the gaming audience that's already kind of in it, crypto audience, that et cetera, kind of, that's who's in that space, at least, in terms of what we can tell from the audience. But interestingly, this last couple of months, we're seeing the emergence of classical as being the second biggest genre for NFT music sales, dominated by just a couple artists, which we can go into a little bit more if you want. But we're starting to see that, and I think that might be a little bit of an indicator of where things are going as people are starting to get educated about that and say, hey, there may be some alternative revenues or some alternative opportunities going forward in other spaces. So I think that's a place to watch. But again, we're just still seeing access and even education around it as still being a big barrier to entry. Which is why you're seeing so much.
I'm fascinated by that classical piece. Just one question quickly on it. Is it a music drop, or are there other elements in that drop aside from music?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brooke.
No, go ahead, Cherie.
So, and Brooke, feel free to add anything after this. So yeah, primarily, a lot of the sales for classical in the last couple of months in particular came from a platform called Async that is taking definitely an ambitious and progressive approach to IP in that it allows, in like a music case, for example, this choir actually released, individual stems of a new record that they put out, and collectors or fans could buy individual stems or layers of that recording and also be able to influence it creatively. So I think for each stem, there were like 3 or 4 different options for, what the, and they had a final, quote unquote, master version on the Async website. And so what you heard on that final version is whatever, the NFT owners wanted, each stem to be at that particular time. And then as like an additional layer on top of that, users can also buy almost like press. It's so interesting to see like what physical terminology translates to the NFT world. So as a fan, you can also press a given version of that master at any given time and mint that as its own NFT that you can then also collect or sell or exchange with other people. So I think that makes a lot of sense for a lot of classical artists and composers, especially more experimental ones who are more open to those kinds of co-creation projects. I know a lot of other artists too, not just classical, I think in like rock and alternative as well have used that platform. So yeah, it's definitely exciting to see.
Yeah, and when you're talking a little bit about the whether it's just collectibles or engagement, which we were talking a little bit about before, maybe before we started this conversation, but the fact that the Async also offers like levels of those pressings that Cherie was talking about, so you can get a platinum record or a gold record, or I think there's a silver in there as well, which is just a matter of how much you want to support that artist and how exclusive you want to be with that. And they're at very different pricing levels as well. So we think that's probably a standout use case, especially as we're seeing like the future of the market is the kind of things that Async is doing. So, but yeah, so moving on, we also did a breakdown of the distribution by platform or marketplace. I think in the past you've seen Nifty Gateway be dominant in this space, and while you're seeing some kind of innovative ways in which they're using, maybe there's a collectible that's tied to either a ticket or some sort of physical object. The vast majority of these are really still those, classic GIF, digital art pieces that have, a piece of composition, with an artist usually that brings some clout to it as well. So we're still seeing almost 50% of the marketplace be dominated by Nifty Gateway. Interestingly, we saw Sotheby's come in at number 2 platform because of one sale. So Don Diablo sold a piece that was actually tied to a physical piece that had all sorts of interesting and long-term value that was attributed to that. So that really brought Sotheby's not only into like the second space, but we're starting to see, okay, now they're going to be a player in the music NFT space. And then Async, which we were just talking about, doing some pretty interesting things with the stems, came in third. And then we're just seeing, just a mess of other platforms that are starting to come to start to bring in some sort of revenue. But really, what we'll talk about in the next slide is that there are more opportunities coming. So this is just a very small array of the offerings of platforms that are starting to focus on music specifically, music NFTs specifically, which I think is going to be an opportunity for the artists in the future, more partnership opportunities, more ways to get creative, maybe more ways to address the environmental issue that has come up with some of the blockchains. There are different blockchains being brought into these platforms. So I think we're going to see quite a bit more of that. And a lot of these, we haven't even seen sales yet on them. They're so new that either the artists have started to mint something, but it hasn't actually gone on sale or on auction yet, or it just hasn't generated a sale yet. So I think probably in the future, we're going to see a little bit more interesting both partnerships, probably offerings, potentially more sales that are away from the classic nifty gateway that we've seen for so long. Cherie, I don't know if you have more to add to that.
I think just in terms of just more like things to expect, hopefully better user experiences, as Brooke was alluding to. I think that is definitely directly tied to thinking beyond just this art collectible model for music, and more about how this integrates into existing online communities around music, which are abundant on a lot of different, primarily Web 2 platforms though. So that'll be interesting to see too, like how that Web 2 to Web 3, how these platforms, if at all, forge that connection between Web 2 communities that already exist and then these kind of Web 3 decentralized platforms. Just to reiterate, I think this also is related to how rights holders are approaching the market as well. I think we'll see probably sales continue to go down at least for the next month, but at the same time, development has far from slowed down. But I think there are definitely more companies participating, which again creates a window for maybe more artists to explore, see what particular platforms work best for their specific use case or their vision for how their community works. So very excited to follow that.
And some of these platforms claim that they're not going to be solely focused on crypto, that they are going to make it more, they're going to open up the marketplace for other types of currency. So I think that will probably help the path toward increasing revenue.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that I'll mention in our next report, which is coming out very shortly, at least after recording this. I think the importance of not viewing the value of NFTs in a vacuum. So if you go back, a handful of slides at that just huge spike and then subsequent decline in sales, that is very real. But it also is still within the limited confines, I think, of the collectible, art collectible model. I think there are a lot of other interesting use cases, this is mostly being talked about outside of music, but NFTs as a way to verify a fan's identity or history with an artist. I think this is totally relevant to ticketing, for example, where there's a huge scalping problem, huge bot problem, and also the issue of artists not getting a cut of secondary market sales, for example. So whether NFTs as identity or as an entry point where into a wider community, where, for example, if you own NFT, you get access to a private Discord server. I already know some like communities experimenting with that, or just being able to keep in touch with the artist over time. As with any other community tool, I think a lot of artists are like thinking about ways to do that, as opposed to just making a quick buck from one piece of artwork.
Well, that wraps up the data that we're bringing. Clearly, the report that is coming out shortly will cover a lot more and even more in depth. And we're happy to go through that if any of these slides brought up any other questions. But we felt that probably the best way to kind of give an overview of the last 2 months.
I have a few questions. You touched on very briefly the physical and digital mix. Where do you see that going? Because we're starting to see some physical elements added as added value or as an opportunity to push some of the digital components, particularly around the collectibles.
Go ahead, Cherie.
Okay, yeah, I can just speak briefly to this. So I think a lot of the most interesting examples of this online offline gap are emerging outside of music right now. So for example, actually, I think in New York and Chicago and Tokyo, there are a lot of physical NFT art galleries. I guess that's like the simplest example, and still admittedly like working off this collectible model. But I guess like creating these physical exhibition spaces, allowing the community to like meet face-to-face offline. I think that's definitely really like beneficial, a lot of added value for that community. But then I guess another example, so in early June, there was this big Bitcoin conference in Miami. I think Jack Dorsey spoke there, like a ton of big like pro-Bitcoin names were speaking there. But as part of that, there is a community and also DAO, or decentralized autonomous organization, called Friends with Benefits. And this actually doesn't technically involve NFTs. It involves, I guess, fungible tokens or like any other cryptocurrency. But they created city guides for their community, like a city guide to Miami, that you had to own a certain number of their token to unlock. So the token is FWB, and you had to own like 10 FWB to access this guide that was also community curated. They also had like in-person parties where you also had to own a certain number of tokens as admission. So that's the most recent example of, I guess, directly tying token ownership to like access to these events. I think there's a ton of crossover, obviously, to live concerts and not just these kind of informal community events. I think actually Michael Rapino on an earnings call mentioned NFTs for Live Nation's last earnings call. Still more from, I think, a collectible standpoint, like, we can allow fans to collect particular moments from shows that they've been to. But then that also points to like a longer term use case of NFTs as showing a fan's history and being able to reward fans, just like any, I guess, loyalty or rewards program that already exists at a lot of these brands, but in a way that I think allows for much more transparency, just is more decentralized, so fans feel like they have more ownership over that information. And then to just allow like promoters, for example, to keep in touch with attendees over a longer period of time. I know that's still an enduring challenge, so definitely excited to see what comes from there.
Well, last question, then I would love any predictions or, based upon your analysis where you see things going. But NFTs as collectibles versus as more affordable, sustainable fan engagement, because I know that OneOf, for example, is looking at that. And I imagine with the entrance of some of the music NFTs into that space, where do you think that's going?
Yeah, I'm seeing more of that kind of thing as you even on the collectibles, where the collectible is almost not the it's not the thing itself that you're buying. You're really buying the external benefits of either you'll see a guest list spot or a private show, or I think in one case there was access to all the shows at a certain venue if you owned this NFT. So you're seeing a lot of utility outside the collectible itself. You still get a collectible that you can show off in your wallet or whatever. But I think I'm starting to see more of those external benefits that this NFT then gives you rights to other things, but it's still verifiable. It's still in the blockchain. You're still saying this is the thing that I own, and it's still tied directly to you. So yeah, and Cherie, I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
Yeah, another example, and this goes back to the concept of DAOs, which just in case people watching this are not familiar, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and it's essentially just any organization or company that's governed by smart contracts. It's a particularly useful format if you want to open up governance of the company to multiple parties. So, like for example, of an artist, among like an artist, label, industry partner, and fans and creative collaborators, and just sharing in that governance and equity and ownership. So anyway, there's one example that I saw. I think it was Maroon 5. I'm curious to see like what comes of this. So they partnered with a company called Yellow Heart to issue a series of NFTs. And if you bought those NFTs, that gave you voting rights to a charitable DAO that Maroon 5 had set up. And I think the focus for that DAO was on contributing to organizations fighting climate change or addressing environmental issues. And so if you own the NFT, you got voting rights in the DAO, and you could give feedback on like which organizations you wanted to see money in the DAO go to. That is just, I guess, like one anecdotal example, but I think more community driven, like donating, I think is a really interesting use case for DAOs. And it's interesting to see NFTs, to Brooke's point, being like a key to unlock this wider external experience, as opposed to, as I like framed it earlier, just being viewed in a vacuum on its own.
We've spoken to so many artists and music creators who are really looking at it in that realm as the way to reach superfans, a way to engage with superfans, and ensuring that they're bringing value to their fans. Last thing, is there anything from your insight that provides you with some predictions on where the market is going?
I guess I can start. So I think I alluded a bit to some ideas that I think will really start to gain more traction long term, is the notion of NFTs as identity and as representing a person's identity. I feel like the impact and what's at stake with that model is also extends far beyond music. If you think about social media and the critiques a lot of people have had of platforms like Facebook and Google that are just like tracking all of our data and activity, partially through advertising, and like users, everyday people not feeling they have ownership over that. I feel like one potential benefit of just Web3 in general, and also like holding this data, say in an NFT, is, hypothetically being able to have more ownership and insight into that data, but also being able to like port it from one platform to another. Mostly from one decentralized social network, for example, to another. That I think is still like in the further future, but would definitely change the whole conversation about like social media platforms, how we use them, how these platforms or like blockchain protocols, like I guess build businesses around them. So very excited about that. And I think that is definitely relevant for artists too. I think there's a lot of discussion around like artists not owning their Instagram followers, or essentially, renting Instagram audiences, for example. And if Instagram shuts down, what do you do? If you have like 1 million followers. So I think decentralized social media I think it presents a really compelling alternative to artists who are like concerned about those issues. And then and then I guess last thing comes to mind that also ties to just understanding like fans and like fan history. I feel like even outside of crypto, like the question of understanding who your fans are and like what they're looking for, that's like an ongoing challenge for any kind of artist, like whether you're an established celebrity or you're just starting out. So hopefully the more decentralized nature of crypto can help with that in some way.
I think there's also an extension that some people are doing around filing their copy protection and putting those into smart contracts. So there's a lot in that space. Cherie, Brooke, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you back. Thanks for sharing your data and your insights. It's always amazing to see you. We're going to be continuing our series of ProSession conversations around music NFTs in the weeks ahead, featuring new platforms and perspectives. Please join us at grammy.com/ProSessions or follow us here on this channel.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.